Elijah, are you there?
Hello.
Hi there. How's it going? It's been a little bit.
Yeah, it's been a little while. Doing pretty good. Hanging in there. Went to since the last time we spoke, I had gone to Miami, Florida.
Really? For that concert, right?
Yeah, went to Rolling Loud. It was pretty amazing, pretty awesome.
You said what's his name? He did the album with the heart on it, with the balloon heart. Kanye West.
Yeah. No, he was not there.
Oh, I was thinking that he was there.
Yeah, he was supposed to be, but he didn't show.
No way. How?
Yeah.
That's such a Kanye thing. That's
that.
such a Kanye thing to do.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Was he sick or something?
No, he just didn't feel like coming.
That's fantastic. I guess we picked a topic, or you did, to be completely honest.
Yeah, so we were kind of just chatting last night, and then as I was about to start my explanation into said topic, I said, hold on, pause. Let's turn this into a conversation piece, and then make an episode out of it.
Woo.
So the just general title is What is a Christian? But we're going to go a little bit into the depths of
clearly a Christian
means.
Just by the way the words work, a Christian would be somebody someone who does the act of Christ, who does Christing. That's what the words would imply.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And we're here to set the record straight because
yeah,
we want to put our self-informed opinions out there.
Yeah, I was kind of telling you that I would have to hit all the technical notes, of course, and then that I would have to cover all the technical grounds, speak the language. They call it Christianese. The Christians call it Christianese. I'm sure other people do too, but I mean it's it's like government or everybody has a book. Everybody has the same book, except the Mormons. They have a few that's added. But other than that, everybody that does the Christian religion has a book. And that's I guess that's one thing in common.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. No, I agree. But the interesting thing about the book is, honestly, where nowadays, and like I was saying earlier, like, what does it mean to truly be a Christian? And so if we kind of go into this, a lot of people would just say, oh, it means to follow the word of God and to stand by the 10 Commandments and try to do the best thing you can be to be a citizen. But there's a lot of different avenues, or I guess you could say like tangents that people go down when it comes to Christianity, because you have a lot of, well, I wouldn't say all Christians are the same, but you have your extreme ones. You have your ones that kind of go off the rails. You have your more docile ones. There's a lot of different personalities to Christianity, you could say.
Yeah, there really is. What's interesting about The Chosen, already I'm already talking about it, but I mean, it truly is a fascinating project. It's what's so interesting about that is they brought in. It's like the Hollywood for Christians basically now, because it's they brought in everybody. They brought in the evangelicals, Jonathan Rumi, that dude's a Catholic. They have atheists. And they're filming on the grounds of the Red Cross, and the production company is Mormons. So, I mean, not to get off topic, not to get off topic, but I mean, that really is, that's like everything, So, I'm pretty sure every spectrum that there is has someone somewhere on that spectrum, no matter what spectrum we're talking about. So.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. But I didn't mean to. I mean, look at me already talking about The Chosen, but Yeah, so let me see if I can just real quick, because I mean, before we kind of hop into the all the different avenues and branches that that you're referring to, which is absolutely the case. Let me see if I can hit all the technical notes. So I mean, I there's the ritualistic aspect, and so the religion is contingent upon a few different rituals. The rituals being water baptism, sacrament, which is the eating of the bread body, as well as the drinking of the blood juice of the blood wine. And so there's those ritualistic aspects, like how you said, the Ten Commandments. So, Jesus comes in, and so you definitely have the Ten Commandments. You have the 11 Commandments. Excuse me. He adds a commandment, which is just the most absolutely fantastic thing. He says, and I give you another commandment, and then adds a commandment. So everybody says the Ten Commandments, but we should probably be saying the 11 Commandments, honestly.
What's the 11th? I didn't know there was an 11th.
Dude, oh my gosh, it's perfect. Like, the thing is, though, is I started doing It's Bible time, and I was pretty well versed in, like, scripture and everything, and not near as what I should have been, but so I really hopped into the Gospels, but the Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. But anyways, I was afraid that there was a chance that, like, it's just like, okay, I'm going to go into this objectively. And I was seriously afraid that there was a chance that, like, that I wouldn't like them. If you know what I mean, that like, I really,
Yeah.
but I mean, dude, the thing is, though, it's just like, he says things that's just like the best, like, I couldn't come up with anything better. So the 11th commandment, he says, and I'll give you another commandment. He says, love one another. That's the 11th commandment, to love one another. That's amazing. He's like, yeah,
that's pretty crazy.
Yeah. I mean, like, that is some, it's comical in nature, because, like, you see, like the 10 rules, like, at a pool, like, no running, no diving, like, the rules, like the rules. And so you have these sets of rules, and then the 11th rule is to love each other. Like, I mean, but yeah, so there's the 11th command, the 11 commandments, the rituals, the same book. Just trying to hit all the technical notes here. What else? I'm forgetting something. Oh, yeah. The acceptance of Jesus as Lord. That he is who he says that he was, and the placement of him ahead of all space and time. So what's fascinating is well, before, God was not in human form. We have a human God. We have a God. Okay, so I want to get your thoughts on this. I want to. Let me see if I can do this real quick. There's John the Baptist. So after John the Baptist is beheaded, in this cultural day and time, see, the thing is, though, is it is so important to read it in the context, to know the context of, like, what on earth, in the context of what's going on in this story, of, like, what's going on. So anyways, because it's not just people take out verses and stuff. It's just like, we don't do that with movies.
Right.
We don't do that with book. Yeah. So anyway, so there's John the Baptist. He dies. He gets beheaded. And then some people start thinking that the spirit of John the Baptist was transferred to Jesus, and that Jesus was John the Baptist. Other people thought that he was Elijah. So they think that he might be Elijah, and they think that he might be John, the spirit of John the Baptist, like, basically reincarnated. I don't know how else to say that, but so bear in mind this very important detail, that people thought that the transfer, that it was culturally acceptable during the time to believe that the transference of psyche could transfer from one person into another. That was the that that was a thing that was commonly thought during that time and place. So with that in mind, we can decipher the story, keeping that detail in mind. Because he dies, and then there's over 500 eyewitness accounts of his return before he shoots back up in the sky and goes away again. But there's a time period after the third day in the resurrection, and then God makes the body's not there. This is what we know. Dude, I'm sorry, but you got me. Okay, but no, I'm not. No, I'm not. Okay, this is what we know. We know that the body. Do what? Yeah,
I said no worries. Go ahead,
dude. Yeah. We know that the body was not subject to natural decay, and the reason that we know that is because that's what they said. And the thing about this particular religion, this thing about this particular set of people, the Jews, is that they don't lie. They don't lie. And so when they really don't. I don't think they do. I think they tell the truth in the best way that they can tell the truth. And but yeah, that's what they say. They say, nope, the body was not subject to natural decay. And so we know that that's not the case. And so we could, and then he was the holy sacrificial, he was the ultimate sacrifice. And then from there, we can look at we could talk about the sacrificial system. The priest would eat they would do different things. That part of it was
the head of a baby.
Not no, not quite, but that happened all the time. But not particularly with the Jews. But yes, plenty of people probably ate the heads of babies. Yes, but yeah, the sprinkling of blood, the something to do with ashes, and then they would eat the lamb. They would eat so that the priest, the high priest, would eat the sacrament. So, anyways, all of those are facts. Nothing that I've said has been. I don't think I've made a fallacy up until this point. But so I'm just trying to follow the story here. So the question becomes okay, so what is a Christian? The acceptance of Jesus as Lord before space and time, before the Big Bang, which is like an interesting thing to place somebody in that position, to that kingliness or whatever. The rituals, the book, anyways, that's all your turn.
I got you. No worries. So kind of what I was saying last night.
Like talking to a damn textbook. I'm sorry. My gosh. Did you hear what I said?
Do what?
I said like talking to a damn textbook. I'm sorry. My bad. I didn't mean to do that, but
no, you're good. Yeah, but kind of what I was saying last night is I have this working theory about like my own opinion on what it means to be a Christian, more specifically in the sense of like how that plays out in real life or how that acts out in real life. And so I guess we could use a classic example of like the 80s or maybe even earlier, like the 70s or 60s, or what we know today as somebody who believes in Christianity from back in the day. Like they are very staunch in their beliefs, almost Republican-like in a sense, and very traditional. Like they have these very old school ideas. And
I think just to bounce off of you, not to interrupt like at all. I think psychologically, an apt word might be conservative, in the psychological sense. Like the conservation of something.
Correct. And so and this kind of comes into like how even if it plays out in church, like a good example of this would be one of the churches I used to go to. There was an old folks or old people's sermon they would do earlier in the day, and then there would be like the hip youth young sermon they would do later in the day. That would be an hour separate from each other. What I'm kind of saying there is you almost notice that here in the past 20 years, and this is my phrase I've claimed, that God is dead and Christians need to accept that, because
he did die.
The idea of what we consider God, more specifically as it relates to the Old Testament, in and of itself, has not discarded, but it's just been more put on the back burner when it comes to like a Christian's theologies and what they believe in. Because especially like a good example would be the movie God's Not Dead. Like when that came out, there was a lot of uproar and everybody was upset about the phrase, and that's so disrespectful to Christians or whatever. But when I would say something along the lines of more Christians nowadays believe in the idea of Jesus Christ and what he stands for rather than anything of what the Old Testament said. And that's not me trying to discredit the Old Testament. That's just taking another example would be my grandmother. She believed in Jesus more than anybody I knew, and she was one of those people that believed in the love of God and believed that Jesus would be able to take care of all of your problems. And she had a lot of faith in him. Me saying that is just to kind of go into the kind of expand on the idea that I don't think Christians really believe in what they would consider God. I think they believe more in what we consider Jesus, if you were trying to label it.
Fascinating.
And it's hard for a Christian to hear that and not want to react like, what do you mean by God is dead?
Right. Well, can I tell you what would be happening in many Christians' minds right now is perhaps it's like Coca-Cola or something. There's this insistence, which I can see why at a technical level. There's an insistence that Jesus was the substance of Jesus. It's important at a technical level that Jesus is the Old Testament God so that the sacrificial system would be fulfilled. There's a bunch of, it's like a technical thing. And so there's this insistence that Jesus is the Old Testament God. Now, just because, well, how I would respond to that is that can technically be the case and still, I don't know, Christians get really up in arms about needing the preservation of no, this is one and the same. And like, I can see the importance of that on multiple levels. But the thing is like, if people would just read it, if people would just read what Jesus says and then read like what the then read like the Old like, at this point, I would need to make an example. Like the way that you judge others, that's how you will be judged plus some. Right. That's new. Like that's like, didn't hear that one before, so people are like, oh, gee, it's the same thing. But it's just like, yeah, well, you hear a bunch of new stuff, don't you? So it's just like, it's like, yeah, it's the same thing, I guess, but kind of sounds a bit different, So, but yeah, the insistence on it being the same for technical reasons is like it. I see where they're coming from, but it's, but yeah. Do you quite know? I mean, you've experienced that, haven't you? To where people are, I mean, your grandmother might be a prime example of that. The insistence upon Jesus needing to be the exact same substance for some unknown technical reason, often to the person, of being the Old Testament God.
Well, I think that kind of goes into like the whole like God is his father relationship type thing.
Right.
But more specifically, kind of what I'm like referencing here is it's like when you think of the word Christian, or when you think of the people that like are in that category of people, and when you compare them specifically to the Islam people or to the Jewish people, there's one key difference from the other two religions that's only present in Christianity, and that is the presence of Jesus Christ. Or I guess technically Islam covers them, but it's more of like a reference that he's kind of like not as significant as he is as he is in Christianity.
Yeah, in Islam, they believe in the divine, or what's it called? The Immaculate Conception, which is fascinating that the Muslims lend the Christians that. They believe in the Immaculate Conception. The Muslims do. That's a lot. Like that's quite a bit of. I mean, that's like huge. I don't know. I don't know what to make of that
No,
exactly, but
yeah,
they subscribe to that. I
right.
don't know quite what to make of that either. I'm just yeah. Um, yeah, yeah, I digress.
No, yeah, I find that interesting as well. But yeah, I don't know. I always just thought it was interesting how the main thing, at least here in America, about Christianity is this, like the Jesusification, if you want to call it that, of the religion, and how nowadays it seems like it's way more present that Jesus is the center of it as opposed to as God, where you'll still see some preachers and different churches and stuff like that still reference God quite a bit. As just from my experience growing up and just being around different people, it always felt like Jesus was the center point or Jesus was the focus. More specifically, like when people would reference
Well, good for you.
Bible verses or when they would talk about specific parts of the Bible. I always just felt like, at least for the main audiences, it was easier to reference the New Testament than was the Old Testament because the Old Testament had some things that it was harder to relate
Right. Yeah, there's I think that people how do you say this? Jordan Peterson says that he basically says that's the best it could be, is basically his explanation, is that the Old Testament is like that's the best we got, like that is the best. You know, like that is the that no one else could have done it better, is his particular explanation of the Old Testament.
Right.
I mean, I just got done doing a video on Leviticus 20, to where, and I might have told you this, I'm not entirely sure, but I think I picked apart Leviticus 20, and still managed to function within the realms of like the checks and balances. I think I did that, but basically, you know, I was saying, because Leviticus 20 says that if a man, well, it's also confusing because it's difficult to know what exact, because
haven't we talked about this before where there's a translational issue there?
It's like a 50-50, I think. I feel uncomfortable putting a number to it, but there's a rather good chance that it did mean young boy. There's a high likelihood that that's the case. And there's also somewhat of a likelihood that when it says a man lies with a man as if he was a woman, that's a very specific way to say something. It might not there. How do you say this? Like, it could be like alluding to a type of rape, like a not, you know, like bit of a disclaimer here, some like mature content or whatever. But like if you rape someone, they're non-erect. So rape.
Oh, gotcha.
Right. But I mean, that's also theorizing as well. But the word for man may very well have been young boy, but that is often contested and is not entirely known to be the case. So I went ahead and did a video and said, all right, let's assume that it, assuming it does mean man, where do we go from here? You know? And I guess I basically said, you know, the story of, the woman, the Pharisees, they bring him a woman that was caught in adultery. And then he says,
Vaguely, yeah.
yeah, he says, whichever one of you perfect people, whichever one of you's perfect can throw the first stone. Um, and nobody throws a stone because nobody's perfect except for Jesus. And they didn't think so, but like at all. They're like, dude, it's so funny. They're like this God. I don't even like him, but yeah, he said that, and so basically, I constructed the entire argument from the idea that there were no perfect people then at any point. There were no perfect people in John 8, and there were no perfect people in Leviticus. So I derived the entire argument, as to say that perfect people didn't exist in Leviticus. So basically, it nullifies in my argumentation, the verse in Leviticus, which I would say is the correct way to render that. And there are people that don't render it that way, and then I would say that they're condoning murder, that's a detestable act against their religion. Is how I would explain that. But
Interesting.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, a lot has. Yeah, it's there's a new movie, The Jesus Movement or something. I don't know. I don't know what it's called. It's got a yeah, but that's a new movie. I hope they nail it. But yeah, The Jesus Movement something. But yeah, I'm gonna hand the mic over to you.
Um, let's see. I'm trying to think. So, yeah, I guess that was kind of like me trying to roughly explain my theory in the sense of what that meant specifically with
Hey, we can kind of go off the
Christian.
deep. We can kind of go off the deep end if that's what you're wanting to do. Um, I mean, I think I kind of covered the technicals. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah. I mean, I would think at this point we could, yeah, just say anything that's on your mind because I mean, let's uh, let's explore some territory here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I just think like like the question what it means to be a Christian is not necessarily the correct way you frame it because I think a lot of the time it's the lifestyle and the type of um, person that specifically follows that doesn't really even. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's like they don't really even specifically believe or not believe, but they don't specifically even do it to a T. And so they're more just kind of like following a rough outline of what that is. And so I think a lot of that comes into the idea that we really just reference the New Testament
Well, I got I got
more than
a I got a
anything.
question. I got a question for you. Um, I think what's interesting about Jesus is, and I um, well, I have two kind of competing beliefs in my mind because he was kind of this Macbethian type figure, to where it's just like, no, I'm the one. I'm the I'm the big OG. I'm the like very much so like um
Right, right.
so that is the case, but so it's a type of like he considered us indentured servants, which is like a slave, but they didn't really have like employee stuff going on back then. So like
They didn't have good benefits.
yeah, so the thing is though yeah for real. But so we are like oh hey the meeting just ended. Um I'll there yeah I'll call you back. 1 2 3 testes. Hello. Are you there? Can you hear me?
Hello.
Hi there. Um, but yeah, just real quick, I was saying, so it's like the lordship, like it's like we're slaves to Jesus is like quite literally the idea. But there's a type of irony in it that can be missed because it's just like we, because it's basically in that day and time you were going to be like, it's just like you, assuming you had to be somebody's slave, you'd want to be Jesus's type thing. And but no, there's a type of irony to it because it's just like that's how he referred to his people or whatever. But
Right.
Like John, like laid on him, like before like would like sleep like on him or whatever. So it's just like what type of slave owners are you gonna? What type of slave owner are you gonna sleep with? Like what type of? It's just like he may like own you, but it's just like, but he'll cuddle with you. It's like it's weird. It's like, does that? It, you know,
No, that makes sense. That's interesting.
it's like a
I didn't
king
know
you
that was
can
the case.
cuddle with. It's crazy. But yeah,
But yeah, I mean, I just kind of think that the kind of like what I was saying earlier, that like the overall reception nowadays is a lot more New Testament material and a lot more understanding and explaining on the story of Jesus Christ, His
yeah. Thank
redemption and
God.
forgiveness of sins.
You know.
You just said, "Thank God."
Yeah, yeah, thank God. I mean, like these Christians, they crack me up, man, because they're pretty persistent with the Old Testament and everything. But it's just like, yeah, well, I don't see them being Jewish. Like it's just like, like they,
Right, right.
yeah. So yeah,
They like
it's
referencing a lot, or and that's like the Christian thing to do is reference the Old Testament, but not really use it in any like significant meaning.
well, the thing about it though is from a story or a literature from a literature perspective, it is actually it adds to the story knowing the context. So it does. Being as though like the church of its day and time is basically the people that gets him killed, and so like that's like the Jews or the Jewish church or the church, gets him murdered. Like it's like they're happy to do it. Um, and so, like, I guess learning about those people from a literature perspective is, and also there's the sacrificial system. There's, well, and perhaps something that people might not think of enough is that when crucified, is that Jesus being the Old Testament God gets crucified. Like that happens. So basically
Yeah, yeah.
the idea being like you look at Jesus on the cross on that crucifix, what do you see? Well, it's like, well, that's the Old Testament God. And it's just like, well, what's the significance of that? And it's like, well, I don't know, but I'll agree with you that it's the Old Testament God. 100%, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
without
interesting that you said that.
no technical disagreements there. Um but I
Well, I
mean,
don't know. What would you say you see more of nowadays? Do you see a lot of Christians being more well-rounded, or would you say that because of the past few years they've almost tightened up more conservatively wise?
I don't know, man. My thoughts are kind of all over the place with it. I heard some. I heard. I was listening to some podcasts. Them talking about like how churches used to be like these huge, beautiful structures, and how that's like important for humanity to have something like that. Like you don't want the IRS
Oh,
to have
right.
all. Yeah, you don't want the IRS to have all the beautiful buildings or anything like that. You want it to be something profound and meaningful. But I mean, I heard some people talking about like how it's like annoying to them that like churches are like coffee shops now, which I mean, I don't know, like the structure of. Well, it's really interesting. Like, they have like a.
Well, like how small churches, there's really not a lot of like organized what would you call that? Like how there's only two type, like there's a few types of churches. There's like mega churches, which is literally thousands of people, and then the normal churches, which is more like from what it used to be, where it was like 50 to 60, to now it's just similar to, or it's more like 10 to 20 people.
Yeah, they've gotten smaller, and well, Mark, who was my pastor, who was a Buddhist atheist, um, basically.
What a title.
Oh, well, I mean, you got an objective viewpoint, which was very nice, but he and you know he was somewhat hesitant to call himself an atheist, but his like favorite guy was Sam Harris, and we would go back and forth on Sam Harris all the time because I thought his metaphysics was wrong. But no, he loved Sam Harris, and I mean, yeah, it was a beautiful person to have as a mentor. To be completely honest with you, very valuable to have that form of objective, viewpoint on something. But oh, I forgot
Hell
what I was.
yeah.
I started thinking about Mark and forgot what I was saying. What was my point?
We were talking about small churches or and how they're like coffee shops.
Oh, he was saying that yeah, the churches well, they're getting smaller. The revenue's going down. It's in many ways beginning to be a failing business. Perhaps like it's not going to die out is not necessarily what I'm saying, but I don't think many pastors would disagree with me in saying that there's a steady decline. But to answer your question, yes, I could go into like why I think that is or what the but yeah,
Well,
that the
even
numbers
kind of
do
to
reflect that.
kind of to bounce off you, like I remember I remember when I was a kid and the size of the church was decent. Like it was never packed full or anything, but there was always at least, I don't know, a good 30 plus people, you know? And even in recent years, like not in the past 5 years or anything. No, I'd say in the past 5 years. Basically, like the last time I went to that specific church was about 5 years ago.
What
And I just
church?
remember it being, it's the Grapevine Church of God in Grapevine,
What is that?
Grapevine, Texas.
Okay, Grapevine Church of God.
Yeah, it was like a non-denominational, just kind of like general church.
Right, it's like Church of Christ was already taken, so they had to do Church of God.
Yeah, probably more than likely.
Yeah. Huh. And it was non-denominational, so you grew up non-denominational. I'm sure we've talked about this at some point, but
But yeah, and I just kind of remember the church at like a certain point over the years, and this was pre-COVID, had just started declining in popularity, and there was never a particular reason for it. I just remember noticing it and being kind of disappointed in it.
yeah, yeah, it's well, the thing is like
Like, what would you say? Do you think there's any particular reason for the decline of the church, or is it more of just like nowadays people are just, I don't know if open-minded is the right word, because that's kind of the
sure.
opposite of what that means. But
Well,
I don't know.
it's
Have you been
I
able to pinpoint what that was?
well, I would say that people having sympathy for Leviticus 20 and like not I would say that people now need to hear and need to know that throwing rocks at gay people is something that we now find detestable and is no longer an ideal or is super fantastic awesome anymore. And I think if people
Right.
don't, I think if people don't begin hearing that's certainly not going to help anything. That if churches aren't
Right. If
smart
they stay
enough
stuck
to,
in, if they stay stuck in their conservative ways.
well, the thing is, it's like, yeah, I, I don't know what it is um, because the thing is though, it's just like, I wouldn't fathom accusing Jesus of being conservative in the technical psychological sense.
Yeah,
He
no, I
was
wouldn't. I wouldn't either.
right. And so, I mean, there's, well, the thing
Jesus
is,
was a pretty free-spirited guy.
yeah, that does seem to me to be the case. That I mean, I'm trying to think of like examples here, but the whole, how you judged will be judged back to you. Like that's like huge. I can't state that enough. But that Jesus and Paul. So, well, actually, yeah, I'm actually really glad that we got to this point because we're referring to the Old Testament quite a bit, but there's also the New Testament, to which I would say this is just my opinion, but I don't think Paul would have been Jesus's top 10 picks for writers of the New Testament. Now, we all owe an enormous deal of gratitude for Paul for basically salvaging and marketing more or less and public relationing the entire New Testament and old and just the Jewish religion, just all of it. Like we owe so much gratitude to him, but at the same time, I'm not entirely sure that would have been Jesus's top 10 preferences to have,
I think he would have picked somebody like Judas, right?
That's fascinating. So Judas got, yeah, well, the thing is Judas actually stole from the money bags at one point, kind of somewhat early in the discipleship. So I think everybody kind of held that against him. I think once he made that mistake, they didn't forget it.
Oh, he was kind of already damned to his path.
That's one way to say that, yes. But yeah, whoever I dip this piece of bread in the glass, John 13. Let's see. But yeah, Paul, I think both psychologically, perhaps as well as like politically, well, very much so, actually, I would say. I would say that Paul reminds me of like this type of John Waynian type figure. So I think of Jesus.
Yeah, very, very gallivanting.
What is it? Gallivanting?
Yeah.
What is that?
I could see him going up on a horse and then just like literally spreading the good word as far as he could take it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think of Paul as like a sock and Jesus as a greaser. I think that Paul's more conservative psychologically than Jesus was. And
yeah.
And so, that's my understanding. Which is awfully frustrating because, oh dude, it's like, I mean, it's almost comical. There's places, and I need to read more of, I just need to do it again. But, Paul, like he'll be talking about like the false pastors who spread like lies and deceit, and they're not, I'm the real one. They're, but it's just like, I just wonder what they were saying. It's just like, instead of just taking his word for it, like I would love to know what the false teachers were saying. Like, it's just like, excuse me for being so blasphemic as to want such a thing. But it's just like, yeah, it's kind of hard for me to like, just take Paul's word for like all of it and just be like, those people, yeah. But I mean, just in debate and in communication in general, like knowing the opposite perspective and stating the opposite, viewpoint and letting them say, like, normally that's something that people do, I guess, unless they're just writing the New Testament.
Do a lot of that.
Yeah. So, there's an insistence for structural purposes. So with governments or with religion or with anything, too much progression or too much momentum can destroy a structure before it has time to like solidify. And so the insistence on conservatism in a psychological sense is like, you know, is you have to, there has to be a maintenance of a large degree of conservative perspective so that it doesn't dwindle into nothingness. So, I mean, or dwindle into chaos. So, I mean, there's an insistence no matter what for conservative mindedness. But I mean, to be completely honest with you, I do think it is often, like, overshadows the radicalness of the Gospels. But yeah.
Yeah, nah, I definitely agree with that. The Gospels can be pretty radical.
Oh yeah, dude. Like, yeah, like, and the thing is, like, it's, I mean, and I've said this before. I mean, it's never been more apparent how, let's see how to say this. Like, the Gospels were written in a time of fascism and communism, or more so fascism, but it was written in a time that it's just like, if you don't make Jesus your God, for people, for humans have to have a God. And so, like, it seems like to me, if Jesus isn't at the top, you're going to get some asshole like Kim Jong-un or something, So, like, so
I would agree with that.
yeah, I mean, like, so, like, so, like, I'm like all on board for the whole Christian thing, because it's like, because I think without
this is
it,
what you were referencing earlier when you were talking about the, like, maintaining the checks and balances of having Jesus be that figure.
yeah, because I think without it, it's gonna have someone else.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah,
that's a good way to put it. Well, I hate to cut it short, but I'll have to start getting ready for work for here in a little while. Do you have any?
I don't think so.
Cut that part out.
How'd your sales go?
Do you have any?
Did your sale go well?
Oh, yeah, those went. That went okay.
Well, good.
He stopped by and he was like, "Who are you on the phone with?" And I was like, "Oh, a friend."
Yeah, well, I'm glad your small business is flourishing, and God bless you in that way. So,
amen. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, you be safe, and let's see. Can you think of do you want to do the if you haven't made Jesus the Lord of your life? I mean, yeah, oh my God. But I mean, I for real though, there's
Christians, if there's anything I would like to say to the Christians, it's you got to be a tiny, tiny bit more open-minded.
Oh, please do. Please do. Yeah. Yeah, otherwise we might lose the whole thing. Like, yeah, now we're
yeah, I could go tits up.
Yeah, it really could. So, I mean, yeah, we gotta, yeah. So if we want to keep this thing, better be smart and diligent and good stewards. So, alrighty, Elijah.
Well, hell yeah.
Well, I know who has the keys. I'm not worried. Yeah. Oh yeah. All right.